Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kimball, Somatic Leadership Coach for highly sensitive women leaders, coaches, and entrepreneurs. And today I am here with Magdalena. I wanted to share a little bit about how we met before I allow you to introduce yourself, because I think it's a bit of a fun, just like random story. We were in a group together, and I posted about being really anxious, about to have a baby, about to have my son, and how that was going to impact my business in general. And Magdalena responded to that post, and she was like, I'm about to have a baby too. And we were a month apart in our pregnancy journey. And so we connected over that, and I am in the United States, and Magdalena is in Austria, and we have since formed just a fast friendship of navigating motherhood and business together. And like I said, our littles are 1 month apart, so it's been really fun to compare, oh, are they walking yet? What are they doing? And we have actually very similar mothering philosophies that has been really wonderful to sort of lean on each other through that. So I just think it's a really fun connection story that I wanted to share how I know her. But she's also just someone that I have come to know is really masterful in her work around emotions and is a highly sensitive person herself. So I wanted to have her on today to speak about, obviously, just as highly sensitive people, we have more intense emotions. So I thought it would be wonderful to have her on and speak about that. But also, very long introduction, but I would love to have you introduce yourself, Magdalena.
Thank you so much. This has been such a fun entry into this podcast because I was just thinking about us sending each other voice messages in the middle of the night, breastfeeding or pumping.
Yeah.
I'm like, my baby is not sleeping. And we would just leave each other messages. That was, a wild ride, and it was so good to have you by my side, which is so fun, huh?
Yes, I love it.
So cool. Yes. So my name is Magdalena. I am from Austria, and I do live in Austria at the moment. I am 40 years of age, very soon 41. I have a husband, Günther, and a daughter, Rosalie, who is 16 months old now. She's such a darling. I love her more and more. Oh, she's so cool. I think this is a really fun age. I don't know. I really like it.
It is.
And I feel like I get more and more secure in my parenting too, which is a real blessing because it can be tough at times. Yes, especially as a highly sensitive person.
Yes.
And I have been a coach myself for 6 years. 2018, I started. I started off as a mindset coach. Now, I would not call myself that anymore. Mindset is important, but it definitely is not everything. Like there is so much more. The world of emotions is so important.
Yeah.
The world of our body, somatics. Oh, it's just a beautiful universe. And I work with women mostly who want to learn how to deal with their emotions in a loving way, in a kind way. So I always call myself an expert on chaotic feelings and self-love, unconditional self-love, because I have had my fair share of chaotic feelings in this life, and I will have many more, and that's okay. And I have learned how to navigate through my emotions, live with them, love on them, and I'm still on the journey, of course, but this is what I pass on to others, and it's been a very, very rewarding, exciting journey so far. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking a moment to introduce yourself, and that segues beautifully into my first question, which is just, as I mentioned, I think one thing that every highly sensitive person can really agree upon is that we experience more intense emotions. We experience intense emotions. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to share a little bit about your own experience with your emotions as a highly sensitive person.
So as I was thinking about it today, preparing for the podcast, it was like, that's so interesting because for such a long time, I didn't even know that I was a highly sensitive person, right? I found that out in my mid-20s or so.
Cool.
And before that, my feelings were always just super intense, and I just thought that something was wrong with me, right? People would always consider me very strong, self-confident, because that's just what I radiate, in a way, because I'm an extrovert. I'm loud. Very often I can be the focus of attention, I just draw attention very often because I am me. So people confuse that with, oh, she's so self-confident. And I was not. Like, there was so much going on in my inner world, and I did not know how to handle it at all. I just thought, something's wrong with me. I had a lot of fears. I actually had a diagnosed depression, and it was not just diagnosed, it was a depression. Because sometimes we are diagnosed things that may be not accurate, but I definitely was depressed. And so that was my experience, right? I didn't have people who helped me navigate my emotions, understand them, love them. I just thought bad emotions. I just called them bad emotions. They are what make my life miserable and make me depressed, and they are the problem, and I'm the problem. So it was just a really bad spiral, like, how do you say, a rabbit hole that I went down. It was always darker, getting darker and darker, because I had no way out, because I didn't know how to handle it. And when I found out that I was a highly sensitive person in my mid-20s, I read a Christian book on how do you say, high sensitivity? And it was like a revelation for me. It was like, oh, that's me. Because I get overwhelmed with crowds or with, with noise, visual noise. If there is like chaos in the room, I can get really or edgy. Or after church, I'm such an open person. I'm so social. But after church, I was always so overwhelmed that all the people would come to me and be like, how are you at this? And I was like,
Yeah.
And I was like, what's wrong with me? And then I found out nothing was wrong with me. Like 20% of the population is said to be highly sensitive. I was like, oh, okay. This is more spread than I thought. And it did help me to understand, but it didn't help me with my emotions, because maybe the book said something about emotions. I don't remember, but my experience then still was my emotions are a problem. They were just a problem for me. Especially, I already mentioned I read this Christian book, and it was a good book. It was a real blessing for me. And that's where I would also add that my theology, like I became born again Christian, so to speak, at the age of 19 or 20, 19, I think. And before that, my emotions went on my nerves, and I was like, they are like preventing me from a good life. But when I became a Christian, I got theology that backed it up, that my emotions were bad, And so I don't even know if they told me that. Yes, they also said, like, your feelings do deceive you and you must not listen to them. And I do not agree with that, in that unnuanced way at all anymore.
Yeah.
But that became a real problem for me, because I was deep in theology. I was deep in my relationship with God. It was like I had a great relationship with God, but a super bad relationship with myself and my emotions. So my emotions became a bigger and bigger and bigger problem for me, And then I didn't understand, because like I got to know Jesus, and suddenly my world was like perfect for me. And then 12 or 14 years later, I had depressions again. It was like, how can that be possible? I have this beautiful relationship with God, but I used my relationship with God so often just to suppress my feelings, to not feel my feelings, to get rid of my fear. I would get up in the morning and I would be so scared. So I would take the Bible and read the verses that said that I did not receive a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And that perfect love casts out fear. And I would read that, and it would help me maybe sometimes temporarily, but it actually made the problem. My emotions are not a problem, but my suppressing the emotions became a big, huge problem. And so that was my experience with my emotions, I would say, before I stepped into a more freeing relationship with them.
Whoa.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing, because I know that so many of my listeners and myself identifies and relates with what you're sharing. Really what I heard is, before there was this understanding of yourself as a highly sensitive person, until there was that understanding of yourself, it was this idea of something is wrong with me, that I feel this intensely, and the emotions are the problem. They're the thing that is keeping me from living the life that I want. So something is wrong with me. The emotions are a problem. There's something to be fixed. There's something to be solved. There's something to be stuffed away. And yeah.
Jump in, because as I listen to you talk, I'm like, I didn't even think, I guess, that my emotions were a problem. I just thought me as a whole were a problem. But now in retrospective, I'm like, I realize, because my emotions is like, our emotions reflect or can lead us into a beautiful relationship with ourselves. But if there are intense emotions all the time and nobody has ever shown you how to process them in a healthy way, you just have all these emotions, these unprocessed emotions hanging around in your body, literally being here. It just manifested for me in a way where I thought about myself, something is wrong with me. I think I didn't even think about my emotions that much. Yeah. Maybe I thought, I'm too much scared. Why am I scared of this? This is stupid. But I didn't even think emotions. I didn't have the tools at all to understand, how important emotions were. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I 1,000% know what you mean.
It just led into a big, deep self-hatred.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, because I think oftentimes in our journey, there's not even, like what you're sharing, there's not even awareness around what it is that maybe is causing a quote unquote issue. It's just, like you said, a deep self-hatred, a deep feeling of like something is wrong with me. Can't even really put my finger on, it's these like emotions that I'm feeling and the messaging that I received around them that is the issue. So I think that's a wonderful thing to point out as well. And I know that you went into this a little bit already, but I would love to dive in a little bit more deeply of like, what is some of the messaging that you experienced around emotions as a highly sensitive person who experienced them more intensely, and how have you sort of started to shift some of those narratives for yourself?
So interesting. As you ask these questions, I'm getting really sad.
Ooh.
I'm like, there is this sadness. I just can feel it here. I'm like, so this is not to point fingers. This is just how the generation before us grew up. We have so much knowledge about emotions, right?
Yeah.
They did not. And I'm like, and that's how I grew up. They just did not have any tools. And I would be the very same. Like, I would teach my kids the very same things. Yeah. Or not teach them because I wouldn't know anything about it, right? Mm-hmm. So when you ask me what was the messaging that you received, I see myself sitting as a kid in our living room in front of the TV, eating after school, because nobody was there to help me sort through my emotions, right? Even if they asked, like, how are you or whatever, but, there was always very just,
surface level.
surface level. And so there was no message. And that's actually really sad, because that feels like a real big neglect. Do you say neglect?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, my inner emotional world was neglected, not because my parents were mean or my kindergarten teachers were mean. No, because they didn't know anything about it. So that's why I'm so on fire for it, because I'm like, people have to learn and know, because when they don't, this is what, happens. And the other thing, so first of all, there was maybe no messaging around it. Like, you're just left alone with it.
Yes.
And for me, it now makes so much sense. Like, I was always highly sensitive, and I didn't know that. Like, that was big when I realized that a few years back, when I was like, wow, I'm not just highly sensitive now as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 20-year-old. I was highly sensitive as a baby, as a kindergartner, as a girl in primary school. That meant that I always absorbed so much information and so many emotions also from others, and so much that was going on. And of course I would come home and just need to find a way to stuff all this chaos down. So of course I would look for something, and my way was television, eating, and it's still one of my number one ways of distraction, I would say, because now I have many more tools of regulating myself instead of distracting. But sometimes I allow myself to distract myself, with watching something or with eating. And sometimes I do not allow it, and it just happens. Like, I do not allow myself, but it just happens, because sometimes we just fall into old patterns. But I've learned to really, most of the times, be very loving to myself in these moments and be like, it's okay. You're human. This is what you've learned as a little kid. This is like really in your brain. There's so many connections that's in your body, and it's okay. And we are on our way. And maybe next time we go and regulate ourselves. So, I'm sorry, I'm losing track a little. So
it's all useful information, also useful to share your experience. Thank you.
Thank you for giving the space.
Yeah.
And then I would say, of course, I also received messaging, like no message at all, but also the message of, like, when you cry, it's like crying means weakness, or when you are angry, like, some people in the family are always angry, and that's not a problem. But if you are angry, that is a problem. So, so that builds a little confusion, right? And fear, they would just probably say, you don't have to fear, or that's nothing to fear. Why are you scared? I don't remember those things, but I would just say that this messaging was around for sure. Like, in Austria we have to saying, or in German we say, oh, that's not politically correct anymore. I'm just realizing, like, whatever, you don't know no pain. Like, you don't have to know this pain. And it's like, just, you don't have to deal with that. So anyways, uncomfortable emotions were very uncomfortable also for the people around you. So I would say that's a message that was pretty clear. Me. My emotions are uncomfortable for others, and I'm I'm big into people pleasing, of course, as an HSP. I don't know if this is an of course thing, but for me it is. Like, people pleasing is a big thing for me, and so I picked up very fast, like, if somebody was not happy with how I felt or how I expressed, right?
Yeah. And, I just want to take a moment to share here. Like I said, thank you for sharing your experience. And I always like in these moments to share my experience as well, because I feel like the more experiences people can hear, the more we can normalize, the more people can feel not alone. I'm sure some people will identify with bits of your story, bits of mine, that sort of thing. But I very much identify with what you're sharing as far as like receiving no messaging around my emotions, and really, I would label it emotional neglect that I experienced as well. And again, not to the fault of my parents, like you were saying, they did the best that they could with the information that they had. And I remember experiencing these really intense emotions and essentially locking myself in my room to experience them. And I think that has become a pattern for me in my adulthood of emotions, and sorting through my intense emotions is something to be done alone, right? Because nobody really knows how to help me with that. And it's something to be done behind closed doors. And there was some really powerful messaging around that for me of, especially I can like, you shared like, oh, I remember like sitting in front of the TV. I remember in my teenage years, my puberty years, when emotions are even more intense, right? Just being in my room and kind of like wailing and crying on the floor and being alone in that. And so I think it's really powerful to name like some of the messaging that we can have received around emotions is no messaging. And that within itself is messaging, right? And then of course, as you were saying as well, of I would say this messaging that, the quote unquote negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, anxiety, all of these things, that those things are bad, they're wrong. And that if you are experiencing some of those things, that is sort of seeping over into onto your other family members and making them uncomfortable. And by all means, you don't want to make other people uncomfortable. So you better make yourself happy as soon as possible, because I don't want to negatively impact anyone else. And for me specifically, growing up, in my family of origin, my parents had a lot on their plate with my other family member. And there was this sensation of I couldn't add anything to my parents' plate because they were already so overextended. So there was this, again, it wasn't verbally any messaging, but the messaging that I took in was, I can't be a bother, so I can't have any emotions sort of outside of the happy, positive, like happy-go-lucky, taking care of everything on my own, because to be anything other than that is to be a burden, and my parents are already burdened with other things, so it can be interesting, for those who are listening to sort of think back to like, what's the messaging that you have around, your emotions? What stories do you have around that? What's your lived experience with it? And, inevitably in my coaching sessions, we always sort of get to the place of like you were saying, like to emote this emotion means I am weak, or I am vulnerable. Like really sort of look at those links that your brain has made. Like to be angry means this for me, or whatever it is. It can be really powerful to really look at those links and start to examine them that your mind has made.
Yeah, important. And wow, thank you for sharing now. That really touched me. And it's so interesting because one thing that came up as you shared was like when you shared that you were alone in your room, like on the floor crying, like this word shame came up, right? Like this deep, deep shame about us, about our feelings, about who we are, about, whatever, because this seems not to be welcome. So shame, I guess, is something that a lot of highly sensitive people carry because they have experienced similar things.
Yeah.
And that can be very painful.
Yeah. And through more of these conversations with highly sensitive people, I am beginning to notice more and more how prevalent that experience of shame is. Mm-hmm. And how much it really kind of seeps into our experience and kind of colors everything. So I appreciate you naming naming that as well, because I think it's such an important part of starting to untangle and really embrace fully. And like you're saying, you always talk about the self-love. I more so use the language around like self-acceptance, self-compassion. Same, doesn't matter what language you use around it. But I think really extricating yourself from that shame is the way to start to get into more of that self-love and self-compassion that you speak about a lot as well.
So interesting. I just, I'm like, my head is like exploding. I'm like, wow, I've never seen this direct link from shame to people pleasing. Like, this is very, very deeply connected.
Yes.
Like, I was a rebel when I grew up. Kind of, I was just stuffing everything down by watching TV and eating. And later in my teen years and youth, through drinking and going out. And as a young kid, I would just, be angry with my dad or whatever, like be a rebel and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to be alone in front of my TV. But with people outside the house, I would always want them to love me, like all of them, like to please them. And and I just realized right now there is this big link of like shame around who you are and how, that links to big time people pleasing.
Yeah. 1,000%. I agree with you. Yeah. Well, I know we've already touched on this a little bit, but I think it can be powerful for us to more explicitly dive into it if you're willing to share of what was modeled to you around emotions. And did anyone teach you how to be with your emotions growing up?
What was modeled to me? I would say it was not modeled to me how to process your emotions. Like, there would be a lot of loud voices in my house. A lot of yelling, I would say. And I guess that's the way one special family member released their anger and tried to process their emotions, always thinking the blame for how they felt was on the outside, all the others, and how unfair life was. So, but there are a lot of things that they have to untangle themselves. But what do I know as a kid? All I know is I'm screamed at. Something is wrong with me or with that person. So that's not so helpful. And also, like in kindergarten or at school, this is just something that you were not taught at all. I feel like I remember I was caught in a lie once. I said, I forgot my homework at home. So the teacher let me walk home to get my homework. And I didn't have it. So I went home. It was, I think, in the 3rd or 4th grade. I went home and I hid it. I hid the booklet. And then the teacher came home and she said, where's the booklet? And I said, I don't know. And then they found it. And then, like, big shame showtime. Like, they found it and I was caught in a lie. And, and there it was. And, and now what happened then? I don't even remember what happened then. It was just, I was so shamed. Like, I felt so full of shame because I was caught. But I hope if my child ever does that, I might feel angry at the beginning or something. But I hope that I can just, have a conversation with the child and ask, hey, what's going on? Why did you say that? Were you scared? Of who were you scared? Were you scared of the teacher? Were you scared of the consequences? Just to talk through the same things and to ask, find different ways of how you can go through that fear and stuff. And that was just not, modeled because they didn't have the information that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes I'm like, I have so much information about emotions. And now I have a child, and very often I do react not according to my knowledge. And I'm like, goodness, I have the information, and still I'm not like so not perfect in all of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that through that you give a lot of grace to the generations before you, because you were like, they didn't have any of that. And I do. And still I mess up regularly.
Yeah.
Daily. And
Oh,
okay.
Me too. Yeah. So this is another spot that I want to share a little bit of my story too. And that's just as far as what was modeled for me, I had one family member that it's like there was this like white hot explosive anger that would happen, and just like 1 second it's like fine, boom, not fine. And then I had another family member that would really take like really lots of, I would say, mistreatment, and then like explode after a very long time of taking a lot of mistreatment. And then it would be like a dark cloud for days in our house where we couldn't speak to this person, we couldn't come near this person. It was like there was these barbs out like from that person's aura of like, don't come near this person. And so like these were some of the ways of being with emotions that were modeled to me. And just like you're sharing, it's kind of, I just want to name the grief that comes up, because I'm really thinking of, just as I'm thinking of, okay, this is what was modeled for me. I'm thinking of the way that I'm parenting my son. And I have so many books on emotions in our house, and I will, I have little pictures of like, this, like you're frustrated, mad, sad, happy. Like I'm teaching him about emotions and he's not even 2, right? He's 1.5. And I'm also really doing a lot of mirroring and reflecting of his emotions to him. So if he is visibly angry or frustrated because I tell him no to something and he can't do that and he kind of throws a temper tantrum, then I will reflect those emotions back to him and I'll say, gosh, I can tell that you're so angry, that you're so, you're frustrated, and that's okay. And I still get it. I would be frustrated too. And I also am modeling things like when I can see that he's angry and frustrated, I'm modeling things like techniques to help cope. So I will take deep breaths. I'll be like, when we're angry or frustrated, we can take deep breaths and we can do that together. So much so that he's 1.5 and he will start taking the deep breaths now when he's angry and he's frustrated. Yeah, which is just crazy, right? But I guess what I'm trying to name here is showing like my experience growing up versus what I'm doing with my son. And as you named, like, this is not to say that I have my explosive moments, my reactive moments. I am far from a perfect parent. But, there's grief that comes up in seeing the ways that you weren't mirrored, the ways that you weren't taught effective techniques to identify your emotions, to name them for yourself, to know how to cope with them, to help yourself with them. And I think that there's such a, there can just be a lot of grief that comes up, especially in parenting, when you see that vast disparity of like, this is the tools that I was given, and these are now the tools that I am giving my little one. So, yeah.
Very much so. Yes. 100% agree.
Yeah.
Just thought about that 2 days ago. Or was like, wow, yeah, awesome. She just has it different in this respect. And I think this builds so much resilience into their brain, into their bodies, so much emotional health for their whole lives. Like, they will have their fair share of challenges, and we cannot prevent that. That's not our job. Our job is to help them go through the challenges, right? And how to process the emotions and everything. But still, so many things they will not have to go through because of, like, he's 1.5 years old. And he already has learned 1.5. And he has already learned to take deep breaths when he's angry. I'm 40 and I'm learning that. So
Yeah.
like, wow, cool.
Yeah, I love that saying, like, then with the next generation of parenting, that your ceiling is their floor. And I just think that is a beautiful way to look at it. Yeah.
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 Goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear, like, how did you learn to be with your emotion and healthy emotional regulation? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. Before I go into that, I would have to take into consideration or mention a little more about my Christian walk.
Yeah, sure.
Because that was not part of my upbringing, like as a kid. But I became a Christian when I was around 20. And for me, to be honest, it felt like another childhood. It really did. I really think like my neuroplasticity was crazy when I met Jesus. In a way, it was like so many revelations, so many new things. And I started to see the world in a whole different way. It was a very powerful spiritual experience for me that went for a long time. So it was very precious for me, right? And again, I didn't understand that there was bad messaging around emotions because I didn't even have language around then. I just, it's just, I went into my faith like we all do with a confirmation bias. We have grown up in a certain way. Like I had super low self-worth. I had no idea how to deal with my emotions. I just thought everything was wrong with me. And then, of course, you go into your religion or into your faith journey with the confirmation bias, meaning I'm looking for confirmation that this is true, that I'm worth nothing, that whatever, that something is wrong with me, right? And so I learned that I'm a terrible person and I was a sinner, but God still loved me, right? So all this messaging, like, I don't even say that they said it like that. Many things they did say, yes, and that is a problem. But many things I just picked up myself through reading the Bible. It was like, oh, here it says, do not fear. Here it says, be glad, be joyful at all times, have joy at all times. So I started to go through life for a long time, always trying to be happy because the Bible said, or I thought that the Bible taught me, because now I see very different things in the Bible. I think the Bible teaches us a lot about how to process our emotions healthily. Like, just think about Jesus sweating blood. That's very somatic, deep somatic work, right? Like being so anxious that you sweat blood. That's deeply processing your emotions. Like he was doing it. He cried. He had he flipped the tables and everything. And I thought, no, that's just for Jesus. I have to be happy all the time. Because if I'm not happy, I'm not a good testimony to others. And they will not find Jesus. And that's a big problem. I don't know if other Christians relate to that, but that was a big, big problem for me. And I didn't know. I was like, when I was in a bad mood, I didn't want to meet with people because it was like, oh, how can I? Like, I didn't have that in my childhood as much. But in my Christian walk, it was wild. Like, I have to be in a good mood. Like, I have to smile. That's so exhausting.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I was like, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, that's exhausting. Yeah.
Very much so. And then, of course, I had this messaging around fear. Like, that's where my messaging, it really felt like a second childhood. This messaging around fear. Fear is from the enemy. So we have to cast it out. We have to say, go in Jesus' name. And that's like, wow. Like when I think about it now, I'm like, it's painful for me even to say these things because I'm like, wow. I had this hateful conversation with my fears, with my sadness. I was always trying to get rid, and I had a super powerful tool. God is not a tool, but I had this tool like God and a relationship with God and the Bible and worship and prayer. And I finally had a tool to get rid of all this chaos and all these emotions. Like when it was sad, I would sit maybe and cry with God, but the goal definitely was get rid of the sadness.
Yeah.
I was reading the Bible and worshiping, and the goal was feel good afterwards.
And get rid of the fear.
Get rid of the fear. If I was angry, I was angry because, I have my anger issues because I didn't learn how to process them earlier in life. And so I would read the verses where it said, God what is it with vengeance? Like, the vengeance is God's.
Yeah.
Like, he is the one who will uplift you. And so, I tried to say everything is fine because God will do it. So I gaslit myself so much. Like, it's painful. Okay, and now we go to the question part that you asked. How did you get out of this, right? How did you develop a different relationship? Because I had this, like, my emotions, except joy, are my enemies.
Yeah.
Joy is the good one. The other one's not so. And enthusiasm is good, and joy is good, and happiness is good. The others are not. And now I can really say I have befriended my emotions. And that was so hard at times because I had all this theological messaging. And I feel like that this can be a really, really big, troubling thing and hindrance for many who have a similar experience as me, who have had this strong faith. And I still have faith, but just very different, very freed. And I'm so happy about it. And it actually started like me being enemy with my emotions. I read a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is a Christian neuroscientist, so I allowed her to speak into my life. And there I learned about mindset a lot, that your thoughts create your feelings. And I was like, wow, I'm not at the mercy of my feelings anymore. I can track them. I can find out which thoughts are behind them. And so that was the start of a big, big, big journey. And a lot happened there because I just started to reflect. What are my thoughts? And I realized that my thoughts about me were very dark, like a lot of negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
And it made sense to me that these released negative emotions. Mm-hmm. And so I went into that. And then I studied the whole thing very deeply, and then I became a mindset coach in 2018. And the more I worked with people, pretty soon it started that I realized that emotions are so much more important than thoughts. I cannot just fix my thoughts, change my thoughts. Like, the emotions, what are the emotions? Like, I really started to highlight those in my own life and in the lives of my clients. And there still was this wish, this desire, like, how can we feel another way? Like, how can we get another emotion? Like, when you're scared, how can we get to happy again or confident? And with time, and it was really a slow metamorphosis, like a slow transformation. And I think that's beautiful because I don't want people to think who listen to this like, now I know it and I have to go through this like that. No, that was like years and years, 6 years now.
Yeah.
And it was, truth coming in and you just integrate them more and more. Because suddenly I realized on my journey, why am I always trying to get a new emotion? What if it is just important to be with the emotion that is right now and not to change it? And then I realized that very often this was just the key. Very often if you're just with the emotion and if you just look at the emotion with love and say, you're scared. And you know what? That's okay. I would be scared if I had these thoughts around this thing, not in a condemning way, not in a, because you have these thoughts, you are scared. No, of course, if you have all this story in your mind back then, I thought, now I know that it's also in my body. Of course, this is scary for you. And it's okay. And I realized the more that I did that the fear, just was released in a way.
Worked through, yeah.
Worked through. And then, I just learned to sit with my emotions more and more. And then the last big milestone was actually happening with you 1 year ago. Is it only 1 year ago? I can't believe it.
Yeah.
With somatics, like integrating somatics into the whole thing, because I realized, I worked with the inner child, with mindset, with feelings, and it was powerful and a lot was happening. And I was so grateful for everything, for all my conversations with my little inner girl or with my parts. Now I know that we have many parts, not just one inner child. But I knew that there was something more. And I was like, what am I missing? There is something. And I just didn't get it. I was like, yeah. And I had already been into nervous system work and everything, but I don't know. I couldn't kind of grasp it. And then I got to know you and I was like, this is it. Somatics, body. I have to integrate the body in a way different way. And that's what we did. And that's what I'm doing now too, in my own life and in the life of my clients, to really integrate that, to understand that your emotions are not just connected to your thoughts. Your emotions are sitting in your body, or not just sitting, they're moving through your body actually, and they are here. And also many emotions, unprocessed emotions from your childhood, they're still sitting here. They're just stuck energy. And you can release them even now through helping your body, supporting your body. And that is so powerful. Yeah. And I think through that experience, through integrating somatics into my whole emotional experience, my highly sensitive personality has come to a place of much more freedom and peace, because now I can meet the emotion in a more effective, loving, supportive way than ever before. And yeah, so for me, it's like this whole journey that I had, this beautiful journey, leading me to where I am now. And I know it's not the end. There's so much more to learn and so much more to dive in. But I have really befriended my emotions, my body, and I don't know, it's just mind-blowing what it does, isn't it?
Really is. I think that sometimes it can sound small, and my lived experience, and I believe yours is too, is that it changes everything. Yeah. It changes kind of the foundation on which you're standing, and it changes your entire experience because it changes your relationship with yourself. So I really appreciate you sharing that journey of coming to a place where you've befriended your emotions. And really, I would say in doing that you've befriended yourself. You've befriended who you are and who you're created to be. And that's just so beautiful. And I would be curious if you could maybe walk us through an example of how you might process an emotion that comes up now.
I was just thinking about an experience I had 3 weeks ago, because you just said it changes everything, right? Because in a way it changes everything, and then in another way we are still us.
Yeah.
We get to deeper layers of us. Yeah. And that's so beautiful. Life becomes more lifing, like fuller.
Yeah.
And I had an experience a few weeks ago that really set me into panic mode. Because I got good news actually, that means that we're moving, that we're having going into a new job. And I just fell into panic mode for 3 days. And I'm a coach for chaotic feelings and self-love. So that was a great lesson for myself. But I loved it so much. I really did. It's so weird. I remember on the very first day saying to my fear, my fear, I really love you. I really like you. And that was like, what am I? Like, from a meta, do you say meta?
Mm-hmm.
From a meta point of view, it was like, what is happening here? Look at you. You say to your fear, instead of saying you have to go, you're like, I really like you. Thank you for being so faithful. Thank you for being here with me.
Yes.
And then I remembered that 10 years ago, I was in the same situation, and I had not deconstructed my beliefs around how God wants me to deal with my emotions, because, I was still very much in the deep religious, how do you say? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Theology.
Yeah. And back then, I also was starting a new job, and I was so scared that I would cry every day for hours, I think. Like fear would just cripple in, and I would be like, oh, I'm so scared, but God, you will help me, and you will do this and this. So I would just pray and cry. And now you could say, well, but then you did release your emotions, right? Because crying is a way of releasing, yes. But I still thought that the fear was my enemy.
Right.
I should not have it. It should be gone. Something is wrong. So I would fight against the fear for a month, and I would be scared that I would not make it in my job. Also, although I was always a very competent person in everything I did, I was scared that I would not make it, that I would land on the street, that I would not have no place to sleep, that I would have no food to eat. So it was a really existential crisis back then. And now, 10 years later, the very same thing. And when the fears came up, I was like, this is so interesting. I just started to observe myself. And now I'm going to tell you how I walked through regulating myself, because I did not push it away. I said, of course, I started to converse with my parts, and I said, of course you are scared. This is the very same fear that I had 10 years ago. And of course you are showing up. And I'm so glad you're showing up, because now we can process you. Because if you don't show up, I can't process you. So thank you for being here. So that's how I started, like, thank you. And it was hard. And sometimes I still wanted to get rid of my fear and be like, oh, can it just go? But, that's okay too. Because sometimes it's so exhausting. They're like, I just want to feel normal. I'm not hopeless and depressed and scared and anxious and panicky. But I would I would reflect and realize, hey, I'm pushing my fear away. It's allowed to be here. Then I would just, as I was scared, I would regulate myself very purposely. Like I would go for walks, because I know going for walks, looking to the green, looking far away is regulating to my nervous system. I would go for walks and listen to sounds, the sounds that I was hearing. That's what we call an orienting exercise practice. Like you orient yourself outside. And I would listen to the birds, listen to the wind, listen to my breath, listen to my feet touching the ground, hearing the cars, trucks, whatever, what was going on. And I would do that for a minute, and then I would orient inside my body and watch my breath, just how am I breathing right now. I would just observe it without judging. Like just saying, okay, this is how it flows. Cool, my body is living. He's breathing, or she is breathing. She's doing all the things, and I don't have to do anything. That's awesome. And then I would go outside again, orient outside, and just, look at the trees, like very on purpose, like look at the greens, the different greens, and the blue sky, and then after a minute, I would go back in and feel how my body feels as I walk. Like, how does this feel? How does the wind feel? How does it feel when my feet touch the ground? And yeah, so I just did that. And sometimes I would get out of it, and I would be like in panic mode again. And I was like, that's okay. And because I knew that regulation doesn't mean that the fear is gone. Regulation means building a safe space for my emotions to express themselves and to process themselves. And that was such a powerful experience for me, because it would be like this fear would still be here. And I would be like, and it's okay. You do not have to leave. You do not have to go. You are welcome here. We are processing you. And then I would cry again like crazy. And that's okay. And I let myself cry, not with the goal of feeling better afterwards, but of supporting my fear. It needs to be released. So I just allowed myself with a lot of love for myself and for this part of me that was so scared. And then I did one more thing. I learned that in a Somatic membership. I don't even know her name. It's called heel stomps. And that was one somatic exercise that I did on purpose every day. It took me like sometimes just half a minute. I would go on my heels and then I would stomp on the ground and release it with my hands too. And I would go on my toes and then stomp on the ground. And I would do that for half a minute or 3 minutes and just release it. And that's so powerful, because our body, when the anxiety is in us, it needs our help to get out, right? To get released. Not to get away, go away from me, but it needs our support, our loving support. That's a very different action.
Yeah.
And I just think it's beautiful, because I used to think fear is bad, and now I'm like, no, God gave me a body. He made it very smart. And in this body, there is my fear, and I can support my body. It's something that God has given me, like self-responsibility and powerful tools that I have to implement. Yeah. They can't do that. I have to do it.
Yeah.
And so I released that. And you know what's interesting? Just a little sidestep of this regulation exercise. When I do it inside, it's okay, because it's still released from the body. But when I do it outside with no shoes on the grass, it's so powerful.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's like you can feel how
releasing it to the earth. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, go away. Not go away. And I really do mean that, because I'm not like go away. I'm like, I'm helping you. You can release, like you can flow, you can go.
Yeah.
Not in a you are not welcome here, but in a supportive way.
Yeah.
And after 3 days, I realized that my fear was gone, and I was like, I have gone through so many episodes in my life of panicky thing, right? And it, like before my wedding, a whole month, I would go crazy. Or like I said, the job thing 10 years ago, crazy for a month. And this time it was 3 days, and I'm totally fine with that. And if next time it's 3 days again, because there are still things that need to be processed, I'm like, that's okay. I'm here for you. I'm here for it. But it's just so beautiful, because how powerful is that?
Yeah. So
and it has not come back since. It's been a month. And I'm like, awesome. I'm like, if there is still something that needs to be processed, you're welcome. I'm here for you. Yeah. And that's how I did that. I hope that was precise enough.
Yeah, I think being able to go into these real live examples are so incredibly helpful to really, take it from something that can kind of seem like this, like airy-fairy, like what exactly does this mean, to what does this look like in practicality with a real life situation. Like there are real practices that we can support ourselves of supporting our emotions, like you're saying, to sort of move through instead of being suppressed or getting stuck or all of these things if we don't know how to support them. So I really appreciate you giving that real life example. And I also just want to name, for people who aren't familiar with somatic experiencing or somatic exercises in general, like some of these things, because at least I know for me, I don't know if this was the case for you as well, but I would hear some of these things and I'm like, that's weird. Like, these like stopping exercises, like that's strange. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, and I think that we can get sort of stuck in our minds of the social norms and expectations. And I think a lot of the social norms and expectations are that you stuff emotions. Like I think, for example, I don't know if it's this way in Austria, but I think a lot about grieving, for example, in the United States is this very buttoned up experience of you go to a funeral and everyone's wearing black, and maybe it's appropriate that you like shed one tear and allow people to see you like this very dainty tear streaming down your face. And that's it. Like that's the extent of grieving that's appropriate and socially acceptable, versus you look at some of these tribal cultures and grieving and a family member passing, for example, would be a month-long process where they're gathering around, they're dancing, they're moving their body, they're ripping their clothes, they're throwing ash over themselves, they're literally wailing, there's these guttural sounds coming out. And that, to me, is an example of allowing the emotion to move through. And we may have this lens of, well, that's weird. Well, is it? Or is it just that we have not really allowed ourselves and our social norms and expectations to actually be human, right? That we haven't allowed ourselves the human experience of these emotions. And I want to share that so that when you hear these practices, like Magdalena is sharing, if you have this visceral reaction of like, that's strange, just to maybe just allow yourself to get curious and step outside of the social norms. You don't have to do it in front of people at first. Like I'm really comfortable doing in front of people now after years of doing it. But do it in the privacy of your own home at first and just notice how your body responds and how your body feels, because that's the thing that will let you know more than anything of if this is a good practice for you. I know that when I finally started sort of stretching my comfort zone in that and being like, let me just try this, no matter what I think about it or how it may be perceived, there was this very real sense of like, oh, my body needed that. Like, just of the completion feeling that happens of like allowing my body to go through this normal human response. So I wanted to take a moment to name that in case anyone, like I said, if someone is like me and me in the past would have heard something like that and been dismissive and be like, that's strange, I'm not doing that, right? So.
Yeah, so good. May I add something to that?
Sure.
Because I also did dismiss these things very much because for me, they were New Age. And New Age was bad and dangerous, like it felt like meditating and, breath work. These are things that are not that common in Christian circles, right? But just as you said, they wailed and they had these, and they put ashes on their bodies. Like, read the Bible. It's in there too. They were not like, they did it. But we are just a different culture now. And we can take these things back for us. And what helps me with these orienting practices, right? For example, or what I tell my clients very often so that they understand, because that is foreign for many of us, or, breath work or feeling your body. It's like, what are we doing? Aren't those the other people doing and not us? And then, when they get an explanation, it helps them to accept that this is good. Like, this is not something woo-woo, but this is very down to earth, actually. Like, super down to earth. And that's so interesting because, like, the orienting practices where you go outside your body and you listen to noises, then you go inside your body and you observe your breath, for example. It's regulating for your nervous system, right? That might be in a threat response right now. Or even if it's in a safety response, it doesn't matter. When you do that, it regulates your nervous system. And for me, a very simple explanation is because our minds very often travel far and wide, into the future and to the past. And they're like, whoa, this happened and this could happen and this. But when we regulate and support our body like that, we get back into the here and now. Because when you hear the sounds. You are now here, and you are not in the future, and you are not in the back. Like what happened back then, and they were mad, and I made a mistake, and blah, blah. But you land here. And when your nervous system knows that it's here right now, that it's safe right now, then it can access other thoughts. That was such a powerful thing for me too. 3 weeks ago when I had this experience with my fear, I had all these pictures, like when I'm there at this job, I will do this mistake and then this, and then like I will land on the street and I will have no money and I'll have a baby. I would see all these pictures, and I would see the pictures of, 10 years ago where we're so scared too. And doing these regulation exercises, my body came into the here and now instead of the future, instead of the past. It landed right here. It's very down to earth, right? So I landed right here. And suddenly, in between the panicky things, I had different thoughts. And that's interesting because we cannot access our power thoughts and our positive affirmations very often when we are in a threat state.
Yes.
So when we regulate ourselves, we land in the here and now, and you get access to the deep wisdom that God laid inside you already. And then the good thoughts, the true thoughts can come up. Sometimes they can't even come up. Not sometimes, very often.
Yep.
When you are in the threat response, you don't even have access to that room of your beautiful, awesome possibility mindset, changing, whatever thoughts. And that is so important. So I just wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful and important point. Thank you for adding that. Well, this has been so rich. I just, this has been filled with so many beautiful things. And I know that so many folks will be able to relate to so much of your journey, and you have shared so much wisdom with us. I always like to do a rapid fire, just closing questions before we.
I hate those. Just to let you know, I hate those. I feel honored with those, but let's try.
Yes, I was gonna say, don't think too deeply. Just whatever comes to your mind, and my hope is just that they will be fun and allow people to know you a little bit more. And so the first question is just, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from the podcast today?
Yes. I don't know if you're going to ask the question, like if I have a tip for other highly sensitive people. Can I say it now, or
yeah, absolutely. You can say it now.
Like the thing that helped me most with my emotions as a highly sensitive person was to first really just allow them, to be like, oh, here is this fear. Oh, here is this deep sadness. Oh, here is loneliness. And to not say, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling this? Or I shouldn't feel this way. Or why am I picking up the emotions from all the others? Like, what is wrong with me? But to meet yourself and the emotion with lots of love. Like, to just purposely try it, to say, I see you. You're allowed to be here. You don't have to change for me. I love you. Like, these were the most transformative and still are words for me, because I'm meeting them. And I just meet myself. I always place my hand here, and I'm like, hey, I see your fear. You're allowed to be here. You do not have to change for me. I love you. And then take a deep breath. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just meet all your emotions with love and acceptance.
Yeah.
Start.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't do it either, but it's, something that is just important.
Yeah. I think that is such the foundation of everything. So I appreciate you, taking a moment to highlight that. Okay, so this next question has quickly become my favorite question that I ask, because invariably the response that I get always brings me to tears. But what do you wish people...
The pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. What do you wish people knew about your experience as a highly sensitive person in the world?
What do I wish others knew about it. My experience, a highly sensitive person in the world. Oh my goodness, I have no idea. Okay. What do I wish knew others about highly sensitive, or me as a highly sensitive person? Okay, I guess I would like people to know that just because I'm loud, intense, extrovert, and always seem super self-confident. I mean, I am now to much greater grade, that I still am vulnerable. Big deal. Like, I'm very vulnerable. I want to cry. I don't even know why. I am, I'm vulnerable. And because I've experienced very often, because I am the way I am, the people would fire back at me because they would be like, oh, she can take it. Whoever gives, how do you say that in English? There's this word in German, this thing we say in Austria, like whoever hands out a lot has to
take a lot.
Yeah. And no, maybe we don't, because I feel like I'm just strong. I'm not like mean to people. I'm strong. And it's so interesting that people feel like when they, especially alpha males, when they see a strong woman, they get very mean with me. And I'm like, I'm still a very vulnerable person who has emotions and is not like, I'm not a brick wall. I'm not made out of steel. So maybe that.
Yeah, and what I hear in that I just want to bring forward, see if this resonates with you, is that your internal hidden experience is very different than maybe what is projected externally, and for people to be mindful of that.
I love how you always wrap things up so perfectly in so few words. I'm like, oh, and you're like, oh, and I'm like, thank you. Yes, that's exactly it, I would say. And thank you.
Yeah. I'm able to say that so succinctly because it so matches my internal experience, just to share. Yeah. My internal experience has always been so different from the way I feel that I am perceived, and that can create such a mismatch there. So, yeah. Well, what is the last thing that truly surprised you?
Anything?
Yeah, anything.
Oh, today.
Yeah.
This morning. So this all has to do a lot with emotional regulation. We have a little lake outside of our house, and I go swimming there, and I'm not like the greatest swimmer because I never swam. Another little sidestep, I didn't swim from the age of 12 till 32 or 33 or 34 or 35 because it was ashamed of my body, so it would never show it. And now we have this lake in front of our house, and, I would go swimming. And this morning, I swam with, do you say swim? Do you say swim?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Without, I always take a little, do you say a noodle? There is a noodle that stays on the water with me because I'm scared if there is a snake in the water, because there are, and fish, and it scares me that I have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
I just want to have to. And very often I felt a little ridiculous for doing that because I'm like a grown woman and I always swim with this thing, in front of me. And then I just stressed out at the lake. And today I was like, I just felt like there was so much peace, I have whatever. And I just swam without the thing so far, like I have never done in my whole life. And there was so much peace and there was no stress. And I was so surprised. It was like, swimming is not even exhausting. I thought it was exhausting because there was always so much stress in my body with the swimming. My body, like nobody's allowed to see my body. and I can't swim, and I have the noodle, and I have this, and it shouldn't be, And I didn't judge myself in the last few, like this summer. I was like, I can go with the noodle, and I would like regulate myself every time the fear came up because the people would see me, blah, blah. I would be like, it's okay. You can do that. You're allowed to do that. And I think because of that, because I did meet myself with a lot of love and little judgment, also no judgment, I was very surprised today that it was so easy and so beautiful.
I think that is so beautiful, because I think so often people don't realize that even if you don't switch anything about what you were doing, in this case, you didn't change anything about, how you were swimming, the fact that you brought the noodle, all those things, that you can change so much about your experience itself by shifting what's happening internally, right? And the amount of judgment and shame you're carrying and all of that, like so much, it's like, okay, I'm doing the same thing, but because my internal posture is different, it feels so much more easeful. So
much more. And in the beginning, I was like, I can't swim with the noodle all the time. And then I was like, you know what? You're allowed to. You're scared of snakes. And yes, they do exist in this lake. And I've heard stories, of my neighbor who's like, oh, today I met a snake, coming to me. I was like, oh my God. So I allow myself. And so I would be in the water and I would be in there and, really work with my body and be like, feel it. I feel the fear. Okay, I can swim back. I don't have to stay there. And I did that. And, the more you meet your emotions and your fear like that, the more they are released. And it's so beautiful.
It is. It really is. Last question is, what consistently brings you deep joy?
Consistently deep joy? I have to say two things.
Okay.
One is right now, I go out in the morning. Okay, let's take this one. This is very like what I do right now. We're doing a challenge in my membership that I lead. Do you say that? Where we say the no phone challenge in the morning, because we all pick up the phone in the morning and we move them. And like 10 out of 10 people were like, I do the same and I don't want to do it. So we created a challenge. And then I thought about 4 things that I want to do before I take my phone. And that is brushing my teeth, drinking a glass of water, and hugging Günther, and going outside for 10 minutes, And I've done that for a week now, and I feel like my life has changed. I'm like, oh, this is I don't see my phone for the first 1 or 2 hours in the morning, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is like so powerful. This brings me a lot of joy. And as I walk, I look on purpose, at the trees, and I do that, and that really is so regulating for me. It's so simple and so regulating. Yeah. And the other thing is, I love watching shows like Emily in Paris.
Bang Theory. Have you started the new season? I haven't started the new season of it.
Of course.
I need to start.
I'm not bad with that, but as soon as something new comes up, a new season, I'm like, within 2 or 3 days, I have watched it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So that's that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and just helping us all through sharing your own experience of befriending your emotions, helping us all learn to do the same along with you. So thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I just greatly appreciate you and your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Of course.